Hello, you guys. Hope you're ready for today's lesson. We're going to talk about figurative language, and I believe you may have already had a lesson like this with one of the other teachers, but we're going to continue this figurative language a little bit more and learn a couple new terms, or maybe you've already heard these terms, but 3 types of figurative language for today. So this is figurative language Part 2, 6th grade ELA. This is Sun Devil Learning Labs, and I'm Mrs. Gore, back to work with you today. And today, what we're going to focus on is idioms, personification, and onomatopoeia. So we've got these 3 are types of figurative language. So let's jump right into, let's go ahead and gather up our materials. And if you want to pause the video right here, you just need a pen or a pencil. And then I would grab a couple of pieces or maybe a notebook, lined and unlined paper if possible. So go ahead and pause the video, take as much time as you need, and then just continue the lesson when you're ready. Okay. So let's go over just a little bit of vocabulary, and any notes you want to take are great. If you just want to listen along, we're just going to go over a couple of vocabulary terms. So one word that we hear a lot, and especially I think people overuse it these days, but it's the word literal or literally. And what it means is, this is something fun I did. I asked my son, what does the word literal mean? Because he is a 6th grader going into 7th grade. So I thought it'd be fun to see if he knew what the word meant. And his exact words were the legit, 100%, 8 underlines, not lying, real deal. And I thought that was a good definition of the word literal. So in other words, it's the actual meaning of something. It's the actual definition of a word. Okay? Figurative is not the literal meaning of a word or phrase. So it is not what the word means. It instead is metaphorical. If you've heard of metaphors, so a figurative word is basically you're using a different way to explain it than its normal definition. So we're going to get into that some more. Figurative language is words that are used to appeal to the senses of the readers. And here's that, just to review, because I think you did go over this in a previous lesson, metaphor is saying that one thing is another thing. Like, for example, there's a song that says, "You're a firework." We know nobody can actually be a firework, but you're comparing two things that are not the same, but you're basically saying you are this thing, and that is a metaphor. The simile is another thing that I believe you guys have had some experience with, and that's comparison of unlike things or unlike objects, and you use the word like or as. So an example of that would be like the phrase easy, that's easy as pie, right? So something being easy and pie aren't really related, but you say that's easy as pie. That's a metaphor. I mean, a simile, I'm sorry. Simile. So just remember, simile uses like or as, and a metaphor does not use like or as. It actually says that this one thing is this one thing, like you're a firework. So that's just a little review. Some of you may have a really good grasp on metaphors and similes, and that's just review. So just keep those in your head for this lesson. And our objectives today are, the first objective is I can identify figurative language like personification, idioms, and onomatopoeia. And then the second objective is I can create examples of personification. And the third objective is I can identify examples of idioms and onomatopoeia. Okay, so those are what we're going to focus on, are just those 3 types today in our objectives. Okay, so just to review, figurative language is it uses imagery or appeal to the senses. So imagery is appealing to the senses. It's making things jump out at you because you can actually smell a smell or hear a sound, or maybe even by reading something you almost taste something. So it's appealing to the senses. So any word that has to do with the five senses is figurative language. So it just makes writing more interesting and more of an experience. Okay. The purpose for what we're doing today is this, and that is that good readers and writers understand the use of vivid language or imagery to paint a picture with words. Okay, so whether you're reading something or you're actually the writer, you want to be able to both understand imagery and figurative language, or be able to use it in your writing to make your writing more unique and more fun to read. Okay. So there's a word, pow. Starting out with a bang. So this is another little overview of figurative language. So what is figurative language? Authors use figurative language to create imagery and give words more power. Okay? So you want to really amp those words up. You don't want to just use the regular plain, language if you're writing. You want it to really pop off that page. So the 7 types of figurative language are listed here. We talked about simile, metaphor, alliteration is another one I think you guys have gone over, and hyperbole. We are going to focus on the last 3 types. So we have personification, idioms, and onomatopoeia. Okay, so those are the 3. If you want to write them on your paper, just so you remember what we're dealing with, you could even write the 3 of them across the top of your page and then kind of make your notes going down in columns. And that way you have just have it in front of you so you remember the words that we're talking about. Okay. So if let me see, asked you this question, okay? So now that we've reviewed similes and metaphors, what is another way that you like to make your writing special or make it fun to read? You can respond to that if you want to pause the video and actually write something down. Do you have any ideas about how when you write a story or maybe a journal entry or something, what do you use? How do you make your writing special? Do you have a style? Do you use certain figurative language? How do you like to do it? What about the second question that says, what is unique about cartoon shows with animals? Think about it. Why do people use animals in cartoons, and what makes that interesting, right? What makes it interesting that there's cartoons that have animals in them? And the third question, just to kind of get your brains going. So what makes the cars in the movie Cars interesting to watch? Would it be interesting if those cars just drove around town? Just drove around on the roads? Would that be an interesting movie to watch? Just something to think about before we jump into our next slide. And you can think of any other movie that you like that might have characters like animals or things like that. Maybe that talk or do different activities, and think about why you think it's interesting to watch that. I know kids have a lot of shows like that they watch, and there's just so many different characters out there, and they're not all human, right? They can be all sorts of different characters. So that's what we're going to jump into right now, and that is, let's just start with personification. I think that's such a fun figurative language, and we're going to find out why. So I have some examples here of personification. So we can read them together. If you want to pause it here in a moment and just kind of read them yourselves and think about them. We're going to read through them though, and it's going to give you a lot of examples of personification. So the wind howled in the night. The approaching car's headlights winked at me. The lightning danced across the sky. The rain slapped the sidewalk. My alarm clock yells at me every morning to get out of bed. And the camera loves her because she's so pretty. Okay, so can we think of some things that these phrases have in common? Any pattern that jumps out at you when you read these? Do they make sense? And then my little question down at the bottom here is just, can these items actually do what is said in the sentence? So if you look at each of these phrases, there's something doing something. And if you pay real close attention, the object that's doing something, that's doing the action, is not an object that's alive. It's a non-human object. So like if you take the first one here, we always say, wow, the wind is howling, right? The wind howled in the night. What else howls? Live, like a wolf would howl. So they're alive, but they're not a person, right? Do people can howl, right? What about the one that says the approaching car's headlights winked at me? So we got to think about, do headlights really wink? We have our brights, you can take the headlight and you can flip a switch and it flashes a bright light and then it might go back to the regular light. It almost gives the look that it's winking, but people really wink, right? We wink with our eye. So what personification does is that it gives human traits or human characteristics to unhuman objects. So if you want to write that in your notes, it's a great definition to just put down personification. So if you look at the word personification, you can see the word person right there. That's a good clue for what this word means and what you're doing with it. So person, right? Personification. You are giving an object like, let's see, the alarm clock down here in this phrase. My alarm clock yells at me every morning to get out of bed. So is an alarm clock alive? Is it capable of yelling at someone? No, right? So we're giving that alarm clock that human trait, like the alarm clock's really yelling, like it has a mouth and it's yelling, right? Or the camera loves her because she's so pretty. Cameras really aren't capable of loving anybody because they're not human. So can you see where we're giving something that's not human the ability to do something that a human can do? So that's personification. So I think these are some good examples. And if we ask our question down at the bottom, can these items actually do what is said in the sentences? We probably are going to say no, right? They can't actually do that. So the rain, in this one here, the rain slapped the sidewalk. So, I mean, people can slap people, but rain can't really slap anybody. So it doesn't have hands, right? So I hope that you kind of see how that works in personification. Those are some examples. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. So what I want to do is read you guys just a couple pages of a book that my kids really love. And yes, it's kind of a little kid book, but it's Otis the Tractor. I love Otis books. There's quite a few of them, and he's just such a cute little character. He's a tractor, right? So if I read just the first couple pages of Otis, I want you to listen to the words that are used. Listen to how Otis is described by the author and what he's doing in his first couple pages, okay? So there was once a friendly little tractor. His name was Otis, and every day Otis and his farmer worked together taking care of the farm they called home. Otis liked to work. Okay? So there's a picture of Otis and his farmer, and they're working, right? Okay, his farmer, it says. Okay. But after working hard all day, Otis was ready to unwind and play. He would ride the rolling hills and skirt mud pond down by the corn. He would leapfrog bales of hay and explode through the haystacks. On occasion, he would chase a rabbit or play ring around the rosy with the ducks to the sound of his steady puff, puff, puffity chuff. And sometimes at the end of the day, he would just sit under the apple tree and watch the farm below. And there's Otis sitting under the tree, playing with the ducks and sitting under the tree. So that's all I'm going to read of that, but I just want you to think about how Otis was described. So he's a tractor, but he's described as liking to work, liking to play, sitting by the tree, and unwinding. Right? Otis was ready to unwind and play, playing leapfrog, and he would watch the farm below. So we can see how this author has taken a tractor and given it traits like a human. So he can play and he can work and he can sit and watch the farm. Those aren't really things that a tractor can do. So that is perfect personification of that character and using words to make him seem like he's human. Okay? So there is an example of personification. Now I'm going to use this little thing I found that I think is a really great tool if you're working with personification and you're asked to maybe find personification in a piece of text or something or a story that you're reading. What you would do is use this concept map to put your example here. So I should have used Otis here, but what I did was actually use a different example. But let's just talk about what if it was Otis. So we would put Otis here. The personification that you would put here would be something that he did. So what's one of the things that he did that I just read about? He liked to play. Let's put that down. He liked to play. And you can feel free to copy this concept map down if you want to put Otis in your example, Otis the tractor. Over here, you could put he liked to play, or pick one that you want to use. He also liked to work. He also liked to sit under the tree. He liked to play Ring Around the Rosie. Those are all things that Otis enjoyed doing that tractors can't really. Okay, so if we put in the personification that, what we want to put down for Otis that he did that was like human, something that people would do. And then where it says, why is this personification? Well, we could put something like tractors cannot play Ring Around the Rosie, or tractors cannot actually work like a human, right? Those would be why this is personification, because those are traits that are given to the tractor that tractors don't really have, humans have. Okay, so you see how that concept map works. It breaks down our example of personification. It tells what it is, and then it tells why it is personification. So on the next slide, I have another example of this. And I went back to using my Cars reference from the Cars movie. I feel like everybody's pretty familiar with Lightning McQueen. So I used him as my example on my concept map. And then over here where it says, what is the personification, right? I put he can talk, work, eat and drink, and sleep. So those are things that Lightning McQueen does. He works as a race car driver. That's like his job, right? He can talk, he can eat and drink. They go to Flo's, Flo's Cafe, and they get basically, fuel, but it's like he's eating and drinking, and he sleeps, okay? And where it says, why is this personification? Because cars cannot talk, eat, sleep, drink, or work. So do you guys see how that works? We're breaking that down. We're saying, okay, this is an example of something that is personified or using personification. That's what the creators of the Cars movie did. They took a bunch of cars and they gave them human traits. And they made them live as if they were humans. And it makes it a lot more fun to watch. So there's the concept map for personification. And let me see what is next. Okay, so now that we've talked about personification for a little while, I think hopefully we're pretty comfortable with that. We're going to talk about idioms. That's our next type of figurative language. So if you want to make a note in your notes that we're now going to talk about idioms. Don't know if you've heard this or not or learned about idioms, but they're pretty fun too. So that's the great thing about this lesson is it's about, I think all of these types of figurative language are really, really fun. So again, we're dealing with something that is not literal. It means something different than the actual word, okay? And you'll see what I mean. And it paints a picture in your mind. So again, it's that imagery and that figurative language. So let's just look at these examples of idioms, and maybe you'll remember learning about them, or maybe you will remember hearing some of these before. Maybe you hear people in your family use these all the time. So a penny for your thoughts, at the drop of a hat, barking up the wrong tree, bite off more than you can chew, cross that bridge when you come to it. That's a pretty popular one. It costs an arm and a leg. Every cloud has a silver lining. Feeling under the weather, and hit the nail on the head. So for fun, you could pause it here and you could maybe count the ones that you've heard in your life and put a little mark down by it on your paper, or write down how many you have heard in your life. Does your grandma or grandpa use these? Does your mom and dad or your auntie or your cousins or your friends use these? They're like a saying, right? So what an idiom is it's a phrase that's used to create an image in someone's mind. It's used to get a point across, okay? And so by saying something completely different than what it is. So the meaning of the phrase doesn't actually mean what the phrase says. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So we're going to kind of go through a couple of these and explain what they're actually getting at. So let's pick this one. Costs an arm and a leg. Is someone really going to walk into a store and hand the cashier an arm or a leg to pay for something? No, they're not. But what this is saying is basically it's really expensive is what this means, because you would have to give somebody your arm or your leg, or arm and a leg. Could you imagine giving someone an arm and a leg? You must really want something really bad to do that. So it's basically saying, wow, it's really expensive. It costs an arm and a leg. Like it was such a sacrifice to buy that. So do you see how that works? Feeling under the weather. We know that that means you're sick, right? So you're not really actually under any kind of weather. You are actually just feeling sick. You're feeling bad. You're at home, staying home for the day, feeling sick. So like, let's just see here. So bite off more than you can chew. That's kind of a common one too. So when you say, wow, they really, or she bit off more than she could chew. What does that mean? It means like, could you imagine taking a big old bite and you can't chew it all? It's all in your mouth and your mouth is full. You can't talk. Basically it's saying like, you took on too much. You have too many responsibilities. You really shouldn't have done that. That's basically what it's saying. So we know that it doesn't literally mean biting off more than you can chew, as in biting food. So it's just an expression, okay? So those are fun. Idioms are fun. They're kind of hard to think of sometimes. Or sometimes when you see them, you don't realize that's what you're looking at is an idiom. So just remember they are expressions that don't literally mean what they say. They are just to kind of be dramatic and cause the reader to really have to kind of think about what are they saying when they say that. So a lot of times with idioms, you may not know what they mean by them because maybe you've never heard it before. That's not a saying that you are familiar with, and that's okay. Some of them maybe you've grown up your whole life hearing somebody say that. Okay, so just look at those examples. Like I said, if you want to pause the video at all and copy any of them down, or maybe copy down the ones that you know, or maybe copy the ones you don't know, the ones you've never heard before, and then you can look up the meanings of them. Go research, go Google, you know, what does this mean? What does this expression mean? And the next time somebody uses it, you'll know what it means. So let me see, we've got our next little activity is going to be, we're going to try to recognize or identify which ones are idioms. We just went over idioms. We just kind of talked about briefly what they are. Excuse me. So let's read through them, and then we're going to either in our minds or on our papers somehow, you can mark which ones you think are the idioms. So at this point in the lesson, again, if you want to pause the video, I'll give you a few moments right now after I give the directions. And what you could do is pause the video as long as you want to, copy all 7 of these down, and then make an X next to the ones that you think are the idioms. We just went over the idioms, the expressions that don't really mean what they say. So at this point, go ahead and pause the video as long as you want and mark those idioms, and then we will go over it when we're done. Okay, so if you paused so that you could write them all down and you did mark your idioms, great job. And now we're going to go to the next slide and see what the answers were, and then we'll talk through all 7 of these so that we kind of have a better grasp of what they are, okay? So there's the answer. We had 3 idioms out of all 7 of these. So we're going to kind of go through the examples that we gave. So number 1 says, my school's a zoo. So we know by this that that's not an idiom because that does not have an X by it. When you say my school's a zoo, that's when we're talking about that metaphor. Okay, we're actually saying my school is a zoo. And I know this lesson is not about metaphors, but you guys have had a little bit of a lesson about those. I just wanted to kind of revisit that. So this, number 1, is actually a metaphor. Okay, we won't spend too much time on metaphors. We're just going to kind of use them as a review. Number 2, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That is an idiom. We have an X there. So what that phrase is saying is are we actually trying to teach a dog tricks when we say that? Are we talking about a literal dog learning tricks? No, we're talking just about people that maybe be set in their ways, or they have a certain way they like to do things. You can't teach them how to do something in a different way. So when people say that, they're not meaning dogs. They're not talking about dogs and teaching them tricks. So that's an example of an idiom. Number 3, as pretty as a flower. We know that's not an idiom. There's no X. So what is it when we use like or as? Do you guys remember that from a previous lesson? That's our simile. Okay, so we're saying maybe we're saying this person is as pretty as a flower. So we're using that as word, so that's a simile. Number 4 is cute as a button. There's that as word again. So what is number 4? Do you think you have a guess? 4 is another simile. So it's not an idiom, it's a simile. What about number 5? It's raining cats and dogs. There's an X there, right? So when we say it's raining cats and dogs, do we mean that cats and dogs are literally coming from the sky? No, we're just meaning like, wow, it's really coming down. It's really raining hard out there, raining a lot. So we're not using that in a literal sense. So it's an idiom. Number 6 is yellow like the sunshine. So that does not have an X by it. That is a simile because we're using the like word, either like or as. So number 6 is a simile, not an idiom. Number 7, I'm going to hit the sack. You guys ever heard anybody say that when they're really tired, right? So hit the sack means I'm going to go to bed. We don't actually mean that we have a sack of, flour or something and we're hitting it. We mean we're going to go to bed. So it's not the literal sense, it's figurative language. Okay, so there's your answers for which ones are idioms, and I hope that helped to show you a few more examples. Okay, feel free to look up idioms online. There's a lot of fun activities to do with idioms, and you can just read more about it, figure out, a little more about what they're all about and how they're used. Okay, now we're going to get to that crazy word, that really weird word that we just look at it and we think like, that is a lot of vowels in one word. How can that even be a proper English word, right? Because look at all those vowels together. So let's tackle onomatopoeia together. And I put, look at that, I used an idiom. So do you guys see where the idiom would be? We're tackling onomatopoeia. Are we really actually coming in like a football player and tackling something? No, we just mean that we're gonna get it and we're gonna just pick it apart. We're gonna wrestle it. We're gonna learn it, right? We're gonna figure this out. So let's tackle onomatopoeia, that scary, scary word. So what I want to do first is break it down. What does this word even mean? The best definition that I saw was it means in Greek, a name resulting from doing something. Okay, so it means a name resulting from something. Yeah, that was the best example we could find. What it actually means is well, we'll get to that on the next slide, what it actually is. But the synonyms for onomatopoeia are these words here. So like an imitation of something, a parallel of something, or a reflection of something. This is another way to look at onomatopoeia. So, and that's going to make some more sense when we get to the next slide. Okay, what I'm going to do first to kind of introduce this idea of onomatopoeia is we're going to read another, it's a little kid book, it's a children's book, but this book is the best thing I can think of to teach you what onomatopoeia is, or go back over it if you already have some examples. So this is Mr. Brown Can You, and it's a Dr. Seuss book, and I think it's a super fun book. So I have, I'm just going to start reading like the first couple pages of it. Okay, it says, oh, the wonderful things Mr. Brown can do. He can go like a cow. He can go moo, moo. Mr. Brown can do it. How about you? Okay. He can go like a bee. Mr. Brown can buzz. How about you? Can you go buzz, buzz? He can go like a cork. Pop, 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 pop. He can go like horse feet. Clop, clop, clop. He can go eek, eek like a squeaky shoe. He can go like a rooster. Cock-a-doodle-doo. He can go like an owl. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. Eek, eek, cock-a-doodle-doo. Hoo, hoo, hoo. How about you? And I know that's a super silly book, but what am I doing when I read that book? What kind of what can Mr. Brown do? What is he actually doing in that book? He's making sounds, right? So he's saying, go like a cork and go pop, pop. He can go like a bee and go buzz, buzz. So those are examples of onomatopoeia. So those are words that are basically a sound. So anytime you hear a word that makes a sound, that's onomatopoeia. So if it sounds like what the person or animal or thing is doing, that is an example of onomatopoeia. So it's a really confusing and kind of difficult word, but it really means something pretty simple, and that is just a sound effect word. That's a good definition of it. If you want to write that in your notes, write down this scary word, onomatopoeia, spell it just like it is here, and write down sound effect words. And that's sound effect, E-F-F-E-C-T, effect words, okay? And then we'll see what this next slide is. So this is where we're going to do kind of our little quiz. We're going to test ourselves and see if we have a good idea of what an onomatopoeia is. It's a sound effect word, so it is what something sounds like, and that is how you can look at it. An action, think of an action like a verb, an action word, and the sound that it would make. Okay, so let's go through these, and what I would like you to do here, again, go ahead and pause the video and take as much time as you need and write these down 1 through 10, and then you put an X next to the ones that you think are those onomatopoeia or those sound effect words. Go ahead and pause the video if you want to at this point, and then we will go over them. Okay, so if you pause the video and you have your answers, let's go through them. So number 1 is play. Okay, actually, let me go to the next slide and I'll go ahead and show you the answers that I have. So let's see. Okay, so we have play, number 1. Play is an action word, but does play make a sound? Is there some sound that comes to your mind when you hear the word play? Or is it just kind of like, yeah, that's an action word. We're going to go play at the park. Yeah, not really a sound effect word. What about the word run? Same thing. You notice we don't have an X here. So run is not one of those sound effect words. It is an action, but it's not a sound effect. What about the word slurp? Does that make you think of that Mr. Brown Can Moo book? Does it make you think like Mr. Brown can go slurp, slurp? Yeah, that's a sound effect word, so that is an onomatopoeia. And number 4 is the word splat, which actually is in Mr. Brown Can Moo. So when he talks about the lightning, he talks about it going splat, splat. So yes, that is and slurp is actually in there too. There's a page that has a big cat slurping up some water, and it says slurp, slurp, slurp. So you can see how that works. That's actually the sound that that cat would make if he was drinking that water. And so slurp and splat, those are sound effect words. Now what about the word sing? Don't have an X by it. Sing is an action word, and sing can kind of make you think of a sound like people singing, but it's not actually a sound effect word, where it actually is making the sound of somebody singing. What about the word gurgle? I think gurgle is a funny word, and it is kind of like when someone is gurgling, that's the sound it makes, right? So that is a sound effect word. That is an onomatopoeia. Number 7 is ride. Same thing. It's an action, but is it making a sound? No. And I'm going to give you a little example here. Instead of the word ride, if you wanted a sound effect word that would go with ride, you could put a word like vroom, you know. That would be a total sound effect word, vroom, you know. But ride on its own, not really a sound effect word. What about the word splash? We have an X next to it because splash is actually, it's a sound effect. Like you could put an exclamation point after it, splash. You know, that's an action that's doing something and it's making a sound. What about the word look? Look is something that you do. It's an action, but it's not making a sound. There's no sound that's made when someone looks, right? And the last one is the word sparkle. So I think of like sparkle, like maybe a fireworks or a twinkling light, a twinkling star sparkling. So when you actually say the word sparkle, you actually get an image. You see something that's sparkling, right? So sparkle is an onomatopoeia. It is a sound effect word. Okay. So we're going to do some examples really quickly, and we're going to look underneath these clues. So these are clues. This is called a choice board, and if we were in person or you were able to click on these, you would decide what the answer to each of these are, and then we're basically going to just look and see if it's what we think it is. So we're going to read the examples, and then we'll click on them, and we will see what's underneath and see if we were right. So what would this be an example of? She gave him a dirty look. Go ahead and take time if you want and make your guess. She gave him a dirty look. It's a phrase, but what is this an example of? It's either going to be personification, idiom, or onomatopoeia. So based on what we just learned, what is this an example of? She gave him a dirty look. Let's go ahead and check. It's an idiom, okay? Look at the little girl giving a dirty look to somebody. Someone cannot actually give someone a dirty look. So this is an idiom. So you don't actually hand over or give somebody a dirty look. So you can see where that's an idiom. It's making a point, but it's not the literal meaning, okay? We're not literally handing somebody a dirty look, okay? So there's a good example of an idiom. What about get off my back? Get off my back. You've probably heard that before. What do you think that is an example of? And again, take some time if you want to make your guess. Write it down before we check. Give you a couple seconds. Get off my back. That is another idiom, okay? So a picture of some kids here who they literally are on each other's backs. You know, the little girl's on the little boy's back. That's literal meaning. But when someone says, when the people say this, they don't actually mean to literally get off someone's back. They mean to stop pressuring them about something, so it means something different and is used to make a point. So it's not literal. It's just an expression. Do you see how that works? So what about this one here? The candle flame danced. The candle flame danced. Go ahead and take a few seconds if you want. Make a guess, and we'll see if we're right. The candle flame danced. Okay, that is personification. Remember that word person that's in there. So can candle flames actually dance? It says when a flame from a candle flickers, it can be compared to a person dancing and moving. So human traits are given to a non-human object. So that is where personification comes in. So somebody took this candle flame that was moving around and they said it looks like it's dancing. Okay. What about the moon played hide and seek with the clouds? Make your guess. The moon played hide and seek with the clouds. Okay. That again is personification. The moon cannot actually play hide and seek, kind of like Otis the tractor cannot actually play. He cannot actually work. However, when it is hiding behind the clouds or hidden by the clouds, it seems to be hiding. This example gives human traits to the moon and clouds. Okay, so you can see that word person in there again, personification. And our last one here is just one simple word, twinkle. And that is onomatopoeia. And the reason it's onomatopoeia is that it appeals to those senses, the sense of sight here, because when we hear the word twinkle, we hear it, but we see something that's twinkling, like a light or a star twinkle, right? So the word twinkle appeals to your sense of sight. It usually, when we hear the word twinkle, an image in our mind appears of lights or stars shining and maybe seeming to move in the night. Okay? So our last example was onomatopoeia. So based on that little choice board we did, we kind of checked our knowledge there. So if you feel like you got most of them right and you already knew it before we checked the answer, good job. And if you need to refresh, you can always watch this video again, go over it all again, and really get that down. So it's a good little test. And let's see here. So we're basically done, but I thought that I would read you guys, okay, a couple more. We did a story that had to do with personification, and we did a story that had to do with onomatopoeia, with the Mr. Brown Canoe and the sound effects. What I want to do now is I've marked a couple pages in another one of my favorite books, Oh, the Places You'll Go, another Dr. Seuss, another one my kids love and I love, And I marked a few pages that have what I would consider some idioms in them, because it's not the literal meaning. So I want to refresh, kind of go over, just before we end this lesson, idioms just a little bit more with this book, All the Places You'll Go. And I marked several pages. I'm just going to read these little phrases. I'm not going to read the whole page, just to give you an example of what I think Dr. Seuss did with idioms in this story. Okay, so the first one is, you'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights. Okay, think about that. Is somebody actually going to soar up into the sky? In this book, he's not talking about them actually getting into, a plane and going up into the sky. He's talking about in your life, you'll go far and you will soar up into the sky, up to high heights, high places, right? That's an idiom. This one says, you won't lag behind because you'll have the speed. You'll pass the whole gang and you'll soon take the lead. Wherever you fly, you'll be best of the best. Wherever you go, you will top all the rest. So again, is he really talking about someone actually flying like a bird, flying like a plane? No, he's just saying in life, you will go far. You will fly high. Okay, so those are idioms. Another example was, that wasn't the better example. Let me get a different one. So this one says, you'll get so confused that you'll start into race down long wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, toward a most useless place, the waiting place. So again, he's not really literally saying you're going to race somebody by running a foot race or driving in a car race. He's just saying you're going to be in the race of life. You're going to be in competition with other people. You're going to be trying to be out front all the time, right? So those are idioms. Those are all idioms. I like this one is another example. So it says, you'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know, you'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact. And remember that life's a great balancing act. So life, they do always, you kind of have heard it compared to a balancing act before. They don't actually mean that you're balancing things on a scale. It just means you are going to have to handle a lot of things, and you're going to have to handle this, and you have to handle that, and you're going to have to balance it all, right? The balancing act. That's another example of an idiom, and my favorite one right here. It says at the very end of the book, kid, you'll move mountains. Okay, so what does he mean when he says, kid, you'll move mountains? Does he actually mean that you're going to go out, push a mountain around? No, he just means you're going to do awesome things in your lifetime. And that's what people will say when they mean you'll move mountains. It's like you're performing a miracle. You're doing something really great that's so hard to accomplish, right? You're moving mountains. So that's an idiom as well. So I just wanted to kind of end this lesson with a fun story that I think has, it has so many more idioms in it. Feel free to go out there and look up the book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, and it's full of idioms. So I hope that helped kind of drive that home. And so let's talk about our objectives one more time that we were hoping to accomplish, and let's see if we think we accomplished them. The first one was I can identify figurative language like personification, idioms, and onomatopoeia. So after that lesson, do you feel like you can identify these types of figurative language? We did a couple of little quizzes, kind of tested our knowledge, and we should at least be able to, if we saw an example of one of those, can we identify it? Okay, I can create examples of personification. So with your little concept map, you were thinking of an example of personification, talking about what it was, talking about why it was personification. So that was your example of something that was given those human traits, and the author or whoever used personification. Maybe it was in a movie, right? And then I can identify examples of idioms and onomatopoeia. So we went through those checklists, and we put an X next to the ones we thought were onomatopoeias and idioms. So those are our objectives, and that's what we covered today. So the last thing I want to do is leave a little assignment. And I figure you can pick between the two, or you can do both. They're both pretty fun ways of using this figurative language. So the first one I thought sounded like an awesome fun little idea was I challenge you to write a letter from a non-human object to a human. And I'm going to give you one of the examples that I saw, and it was pretending to be a dog. So like pretend to be, if you have a dog or a pet at home, write a letter to a human from that pet, because you're going to give that pet human characteristics. Or you can pick an object that's not even alive. You could pick a lamp or a chair or a table or something, and you write a letter from that object to a human. I want you to give the non-human object at least 3 human traits, and then choose who the audience will be for the object to write to. So if it's your dog and they're going to write to you, their owner, that would be the audience. So have fun with it. Go out there and just have fun with this assignment. Or another way you can use figurative language in an assignment, write a poem about a day in the life of your favorite celebrity, using the 3 types of figurative language we discussed in this lesson. So poems, we did a lesson on poetry with me. You can be that free verse poem that doesn't have to rhyme, or whichever one you want to use. So think of your favorite celebrity. Maybe they're a football player, maybe they're an ice skater, or a famous actress or singer. Write a poem about a day in their life and use that figurative language we just talked about, and have fun with it. So until the next lesson, you guys have an awesome day, and we'll see you next time.